Shabbat Shalom. After Elon Musk bought Twitter, he announced proudly last month that, quote unquote, what he defined as hate speech impressions on this platform that he just took over had dramatically fallen. It didn't seem possible because what he has spent the days and weeks since he took over Twitter doing was mass layoffs of people who worked for Twitter. And so how was it that after laying off so many employees, a workforce necessary to moderate such hate speech, somehow he had publicly and proudly declared, a guy who actually thought that such moderation was a barrier to free speech, that hate speech had decreased on one of the most popular social media platforms. Well, yesterday we learned what we all knew to be true, that he lied. The Center for Countering Digital Hate came out with a press release that said that since he took over Twitter, the use of the N-word has tripled compared to the average of 2022. LGBT slurs, specifically with regards to the lesbian, gay, and bisexual community, has increased by 58%, and slurs against the trans community has increased by 62%. The same day, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, came out with a similar press release, with those of us in the Jewish community also know to be true, that there was a strong increase of anti-Semitic content on the platform, partially because there's a decrease in moderation of such posts. Elon Musk's attempt to remove barriers to promote free speech is also really promoting hate speech, amplifying it on his platform, not just for people to post such hateful bigotry, but as we have learned and as we have seen, for such hates to be shared and retweeted and quote tweeted and screenshotted and condoned, encouraging others to share, spread, and amplify such hate. And in the news of Kanye West this week, and his latest anti-Semitic diatribe, after bringing neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes to meet at Mar-a-Lago with the former president, he went on Alex Jones's show to say that Hitler was pretty good. I wish it was funny. And I learned of all of this, of what Kanye West said, through Twitter, not his tweets. I don't follow him on Twitter. But I saw it because of the millions who shared what he said. And so too, also in that Twitterverse yesterday, Elon Musk decided to restore the account of Andrew Anglin, for those of you who don't know that name, the founder and editor of the neo-Nazi website, The Daily Stormer, who was banned from Twitter 10 years ago, had his Twitter account restored just yesterday. Focus on that for a second because we'll come back to it. We learned a lot from our bar mitzvah about this week's Parsha. Also in this week's Parsha is the infamous story of Jacob being tricked into marrying somebody else than the person he thought he was supposed to marry. Right? We know the story. He falls in love with Rachel. He agrees to work 7 years to marry her, and somehow, this is the PG version, somehow he was tricked on his wedding night into not knowing who he had married, and woke up the next morning and it was Leah. And who was behind that? Maybe it was a family con, maybe it was Leah, maybe it was Rachel, and of course it was Lavan, it was Laban. But we shouldn't be shocked, readers of the Torah shouldn't be surprised that Laban was filled with such a wicked intent. Why? If we look back just several Torah portions ago, several parshiot, to Parashat Chaye Sarah, when we have the case of another interpersonal relationship, when Isaac goes to marry Rebekah, and Eliezer, Abraham's servant, goes to find the person for Isaac to marry. And Eliezer asks Rebekah, who is her family? At first, we're told that her father is Bethuel, as the Torah usually does. It references your father's home that you come from. But then it goes on to say that she is Laban's sister. Rivka ach ushmo Lavan. And Rivka had a brother, and his name was Lavan. Most of our Mefarshim, our commentators, suggest that this is foreshadowing to what happens next. If there is no beginning or end to Torah, that we're told that Torah is actually not in chronological order, but that everything that happens can foreshadow or give insight to something that happened previously or something that will happen next. By Rivka being referenced to being in relation and related to Laban, Lavan, then when we see her own wicked acts, what she did just in last week's Torah portion by tricking her own husband into giving the blessing to Jacob instead of Esau, then we shouldn't be surprised when we encounter Laban for the first time in our Torah as the father of Rachel and Leah, and he himself is full of wickedness and deception. And all the more so for readers who are aware of the Torah, when we know the story of Laban and Lavan and Rivka is introduced, we should know that she will be deceitful and wicked, because if we knew what Lavan does, then we know what Rivka will do. You see, one's acts are not just influenced by them and do not just impact them, but when we see somebody acting in a certain way, we follow their lead, for better or for worse. Now, our commentators who try to save face of our Avot and Imahot try to spin things to make our biblical patriarchs and matriarchs these great tzaddikim. They say Rivka wasn't a bad person, but Lavan was. So how is it possible that Laban, who deceives Jacob into marrying the wrong woman in this week's Parsha, is bad, but Rebekah, who deceived her husband into giving the blessing to the wrong son, last week's Torah portion, is not? And they conclude it's because Laban was the one who spread such evil wickedness and had a wicked intent. And in ignorance, Rivka, was simply influenced by that. He was the brainchild behind that wicked intent, but she quickly was influenced by such wicked intent as well. And that's why when she is first introduced in the Torah, she's called the sister of Lavan. So, what do we take from this idea? We understand that everything that we do and everything that we say has this ripple effect. The Torah is telling us that with their relationship, that if one person does something and intends to do something, how easy it is, without them even knowing, without us even knowing, to influence and to impact others. Gives permission for others to act in the same way. We shouldn't be surprised by Lavan's actions when Rivka acted that way. We shouldn't be surprised by Rivka's actions if we knew Lavan acted in that way. To see, coming back to this world of Twitter, this heightened anti-Semitic and racist and homophobic and bigoted speech, I'm not worried about a rapper, a music producer, fashion designer. I'm not worried about Kanye West. But I'm worried about Kanye West's 28 million social media followers. 28 million, by the way, which is double the amount of Jews there are in this world. Because as the Anti-Defamation League, as the ADL teaches us, that hateful speech always, always, always leads to hateful acts. Maybe it's not by the person who said those hateful words, but unfortunately, before we know it, it will be by one of those 28 million Twitter followers. We know that people aren't born with prejudice. Even, that's true, psychologists tell us that, but that's also true from a rabbinic perspective. Rabbinic tradition teaches that we actually have the equal amount within us, Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Ra, 50% chance to be good in this world, 50% chance to be evil in this world, and it's who we surround ourselves with. The voices that we surround ourselves with tip the scale one way or another. Every word that we say matters. So our question is, what are the words that we will say? And how do we respond as individuals and as society when such troublesome and hateful words are getting louder and louder and retweeted more and more? Our task, ultimately, is then to be louder and more vocal, to spread words of love and to call out words of hate. Because our children are listening and our children are watching, and they're waiting to see how all of us will respond. What they hear, what they are taught, what they see will influence who they become. And so it's on all of us then to shape the future with more love than hate.